All right, testing, 1, 2, 3. I'm just gonna check out Twitch for a couple seconds, make sure the stream actually does go live over there, and then we'll kick it off. And it looks like it's going live over there. So everyone, welcome to Couchcon. This is gonna be our first panel, and I want to also come out and say thank you to everyone who made the Couchcon launch go very well. We've got original art for sale in the dealer's room. We have auctions going up. We've got skirmish games, books. Any Dreamkeeper's book that you get this weekend is going to come signed for free, and it's going great. A lot of the stuff is already sold. We have commission slots. Most of those are gone. So if you're interested in the stuff we've got for Couchcon, if you're interested in checking out the other dealers, go to vividpub.com/Couchcon, and you too can see all the cool stuff we got available. But for now, it's time for the first panel of Couchcon, Living Landscapes. So let me go ahead and get the display capture back here. There we go. Alright, Living Landscapes. So I've got a few notes here. Let's just jump right in and try to get some quality bang for your time. Living Landscapes. First of all, when it comes to settings, a lot of people, there's a tendency for people to just kind of draw really cool characters, which is natural, it's understandable. Everyone likes to look at a cool, awesome character, but especially if you're talking about some kind of a comic book or a scenario or a setting, backdrop can be a huge, huge part of it. And I've got some Dreamkeeper stuff here. I've got some stuff from other comics, so we're just going to use some examples as we look at things. But anyways, actually I'm not sure if that would be allowed on Twitch. There's no nipples showing, but still, they can be pretty touchy. So anyways, setting can be really important. A lot of people are tempted to just jump in, draw some cute, sexy characters, and call it good. And they're always kind of floating in some weird ether, or else there's a very abbreviated background that's put in almost as an afterthought. And especially if you just got like a single illustration, you just want to show off a cool character, a lot of times that's fine. But for me and for a lot of projects, you need that setting to really bring a lot of grit and depth and meaning, and it adds so much. Because a setting, it's more than just a pretty backdrop for your characters. A setting literally is the context for everything that's happening. It's the context for your plot, and it's the context for your characters. I mean, if you think about it, whatever your character is doing is partially defined by the setting. Let's say you have a couple of characters having hot, steamy sex. If they're having hot, steamy sex in a bedroom, that's pretty self-explanatory. If they're having hot, steamy sex in the middle of a packed courtroom with like people all around them aghast that this could possibly be happening, that's a completely different story. Those are two totally different sets of characters. They do not have the same behavior. They don't have the same attitude towards society. So, same characters, same action, but you change the setting and it completely changes the meaning of what is going on, and it changes who those characters are. And you can even reverse it. Let's say you have some like legalese sort of character diligently reading off evidence in a very haughty tone. If they're doing that in a packed courtroom, hey, it's like a prosecutor or a defense attorney or someone like that. They're doing their job, they're playing their role. But if you have some character reading off a list of evidence in the bedroom to their significant other, suddenly you're wondering, is this a crackpot? Why is this guy reeling off evidence like he's in the courtroom in the bedroom? So, and in that case, the setting can even kind of define the morality or the appropriateness of the action the characters are doing. So, if there's a barbarian that slaughters enemies in an arena versus a barbarian that slaughters people in like a tent for parley, for talking truces, same action, different context, different meaning. So, for even regarding simple character actions, the context is very important in terms of telling the reader, telling the viewer, what do those actions mean? Why are they important? What sort of moral impact do they have? And obviously the same goes for plot. You could have someone cannibalizing a victim in a street, and if they're in post-apocalyptic Austin versus 1999 Detroit, same action, but it's a very different story. So I would say setting is the context of your characters, setting is the context of your plot. So whether it's a one-shot illustration or anything that involves a story, I think that's the commonality. If you just have a character picture where it's like, oh look, it's a sexy character, that's cool. But if you're trying to tell any kind of a story, like the setting is half of it. It is the crucial half of the story that sort of says, why is this happening and what does it mean? So I'm just going to switch over pictures from time to time, and we'll talk about the pictures in more depth after I finish my spiel and we start applying the specifics to the images before us. Let me zoom in a little bit there, because, it's more fun to look at. So, in comics, what do settings do especially good in comics? Because I work in comics, so I kind of have that more on the top of my mind. let's see, what comics can do. They explain the setting visually, which is very nice. Like if you have something going on in the storyline, a comic setting can leave overt clues as to what the situation is and what's happening and why it's happening. Like if you're reading a novel, obviously a novel can't really show you things literally. A novel has to write it all down in text. But if you're reading a comic, you can just look and see what's going on. So this is just an example from Dreamkeepers Volume 3. Up at this first panel, it's a nice establishing shot. You can tell this is some sort of a grim landscape. It's very dark, it's barren, it's wasted. There's some sort of demented tendrils or roots coming out from a central tree-looking thing. Here we have some vents that are spewing sulfurous content. There's piles of bones around, and it looks like the only thing growing are roots from this tree and some sort of a disgusting-looking fungus that clusters around these sulfuric vents. So that already paints it literally paints a fairly vivid picture, and it sets the stage for whatever's going on, which appears to be some sort of a conflict in the background. Here we have some architecture, so suddenly you know, not only is this place barren, but it's still inhabited, and it's inhabited by people who really like to decorate their buildings with skulls and spines and various things like that. We get closer, we see there's a central ziggurat, so you get the idea. In a comic, a setting can tell you a lot of information. We don't even have any words at all aside from sound effects until we get right down here. And even then, this is more like patter from the crowd. It's not so much like critical, like, here's what is happening, we will tell you, the reader. So in a comic, you can use like really detailed, intricate settings to obviate the need for exposition. You don't have to sit down and have a bunch of word boxes telling the reader, here is exactly what is happening. The hero is doing X and Y, and see how he does Z as he clenches his teeth. It's like you can just show it. So obviously in comics, that's a really nice thing to do. The other thing too is if you tell a reader, in a comic especially, if you tell them with exposition what is happening, then they're being told what's going on. Whereas if you just show it to them in a panel and they have to look at it and they have to figure it out for themselves, that's a lot more immersive. At that point, the reader is experiencing what is going on because they actually have to look and then they have to put it together in their own head without being instructed exactly what's happening. Now, I don't want to completely bash exposition. Sometimes exposition can give you a lot of very crucial information that would be really dull or time-consuming to just like show and make the reader walk through manually. So exposition is a tool. Sometimes it's the right tool for the job. But if you want to be immersive, you want to show the reader things and make them feel, what's going on. Like make them put the story together in their own head, and that's going to tie them into what you're doing a lot more effectively. So in comics, the setting can explain the situation visually, and it also provides mood and atmosphere, which is very important. Let's say there's like a very grim scene where the characters are going through something like harrowing, and it's like a bright sunshiny day, there's daisies and birds chirping. You can have the setting be a counterpoint to the overall mood, or you can have it accent the mood and like kind of go in the same direction. Like I think in the previous page here, this is an example of the setting just going in the same direction as the mood, same tone, it's all feeding into itself. It's a very grim setting, and there's very grim, monstery things occurring. But like I said, that doesn't necessarily mean that's the only way to do it. You can also have a setting where things are bright and happy, and the characters are down in the dumps, or you can have a very grim setting where the characters are a little more chipper. But the point is, the setting really adds an important emotional aspect to whatever the scene is doing. So if you're not using the setting to set the tone and the mood and like tune the emotions of the reader, that's essentially half of your arsenal that's not being used as a storyteller. So setting's very important for telling the story. And we're going to get into some details here about like what kind of stories can you get from these settings and these images. Alright, continuing on with my notes, my little spiel. So now we're kind of getting into the nitty-gritty. Hopefully I've made the case to you that yes, settings are important. Settings can really add a lot to your story, especially if you're telling a story. So how exactly do you do that? What are the things in a setting that you kind of want to use, the basic tools? Well, the first thing a setting can do is it provides a framework for what you're looking at. By that I mean it provides literal, like, three-dimensional depth. It provides perspective. It tells you what the camera angle is going to be. It tells you how the shot is being framed. All that stuff that a cinematographer does. Like, for example, we'll just talk about in this one, what's the cinematography on just this one panel? Well, as you can see where the horizon line is here, The horizon line is right down with the characters. The characters are in the foreground. So psychologically what that does is it kind of makes you feel like you're there with the characters. You're experiencing things literally on the same level as them. Now if the horizon line was way up here and the camera was like zoomed out more, we were flying way up high above the characters, that would make it feel a little more like we're distant observers of some type, looking down on the situation. This one's a little more like that. You can see the horizon line here is, it's not right on his eye level. The horizon line is really more up around here, at the top of his head. So we're a little bit higher up. We're not quite down with the character. We're getting more of an overview of what this image looks like, and he's just sort of a piece of the framework introducing us to this setting. So, obviously, if you look at this setting, there's a lot of visual depth. The foreground is essentially just this little bit of sidewalk, and then it goes way deep. So sometimes you want a lot of depth, sometimes you don't. It depends on, it's a tool. It's a tool in a toolbox. So the way that you can get settings to work for you, one way is framework, how you set up the shot, what perspective you use, cinematography. Another one is lighting and atmosphere. Because basically anything in a scene that you can see, you can only see it because there's light bouncing off of it. And the nature of light has a lot of psychological weight for humans. If you're in a dark, scary room, even if there's nothing scary going on, sometimes you just feel a little nervous. If you're in a bright outdoor setting and it's lit up, sometimes that can boost your mood. So the nature of light has a lot of stuff that it can affect us with emotionally. So you want to absolutely leverage the nature of light in what you're showing. And sometimes I got some more stuff over here. Here's one from Transmetropolitan, which is a very good comic, but I would say when it comes to the nature of the lighting, this comic doesn't really have, in this panel, any particular lighting. Lots of depth, lots of detail. But that would be one element where, in a perfect world, it'd have a little bit more in terms of like, what is the light doing and how is that adding to the depth? Because that's another thing about the light. Like, for example, let's go back to this desert one here. As you can see, you get a pretty clear view. Things are sharp in the foreground and they're sharp in the background, so there's not a lot of atmospheric perspective. And the reason that I made sure not to put very much atmospheric, there's a little bit, but I didn't want to put a lot in here because if you put a lot of atmospheric perspective and haze in a picture, one of the things that does is it tends to make it look humid. Because if you're outside on a humid day, you look into the distance, things are hazy. Whereas if it's a very dry day, a lot of times things are going to be crystal clear for a long range, unless there's a dust storm or something like that, but that would have a bit of a different look to it than just a pure humid haze. So lighting and atmosphere, it can do different things, like it can tell you if it's daylight, it can tell you if you have diffused lighting, if the sun is above the clouds and it's kind of like spread out more, if it's just totally raw, if you have a spotlight that's like nailing a criminal to the wall, if you have a humid area, if it's a jungle and there's like steam coming off of everything, or if it's a desert where it's just all clear and crisp. So the way you convey your lighting is going to tell you a lot about the scene, and it's going to make the reader feel very differently about what they're looking at. So that's another tool in the toolbox. There's the framework, depth, perspective, camera angle, framing, light and atmosphere, which kind of reveals or doesn't reveal everything. Light can also be revealing or concealing, directional, and all that cool stuff. That's another thing too. When you have any scene that has a lot of depth to it, I find that usually lighting is one of the things that will convey that depth really effectively. Like if you have flat lighting, like you can see here, this is really an overcast day. The light's almost coming from everywhere. The sun isn't shining, so there's no harsh shadows that are falling, no harsh black shadows that are clearly delineated. So there's a lot of depth, but it doesn't necessarily feel that deep because the light is so flat. And that's deliberate because, in this particular scene we want to introduce the neons, and so we want the neon graffiti to really stand out as much as possible. And to do that, we want to have the rest of the scene sort of fade away, be a little monochromatic, a little monotone. So, that's an example of like, how do you want to manipulate the light to emphasize what you want to emphasize in the scene. Alright, and now we're getting to contents. What's in the space, how is it in the space, and why? And I think this really gets into the meat and potatoes of setting and how you can use it to like just pump things up. And I think we're just going to go through all these images I have lined up, look at the scenes, and then figure out what kind of a story can we derive from what we're looking at. And I find the more you do that, even in real life, the more you're just walking around looking at things around you, if you can look at things and basically play Sherlock Holmes wherever you're going, try to figure out what is this, why is this here, how did it get here. If you just get yourself thinking in that mindset, it can just pay a lot of dividends when you're sitting down and trying to construct a scene and put some stuff together. So, yeah. So, is stuff old? Is stuff new? Is it dirty? Is it clean? Why is it dirty or clean? What's the history? what's important about the scene now, what has been this way for a long time, what's changed recently. And the last thing I'm going to say in terms of basic tools in the toolbox for making the setting work, one thing that people often forget about when coloring is you want to have value contrast. So you want to bear in mind what's going to be the darkest darks and the lightest lights, because wherever you have the most value contrast, that tends to be where the eye gets drawn to and whatever is emphasized the most. So here we have another one. I like this one. So value contrast is important, space is important, contrasting things that are like nearby in the foreground with things that are way off in the background. Color, you want to have sometimes some warm tones, sometimes some cool tones. Even in this one it's subtle, but up here the color and the light is more warm from these glow orbs, and then down here there's no glow orbs at all. All the light is from that data scroll, so it's a little more cool and mysterious as he descends deeper into this sort of mystery area. And then also another thing you want to keep in mind is negative space. Sometimes you want the whole image to be cluttered up with detail, but sometimes you want to have detail in one area, and then areas to contrast with that where there's almost no detail, where it's nice and open and breathes a little bit more. And there's no constant formula as to like what do you do, what do you not do, when do you do it, but they're just tools that you want to use to their maximum effect. So I guess now we're going to just go ahead, we're going to look at some pictures together, and I'm going to yak about what does this tell us about the scene. Well, some of these are commissions, some of these are comic pages from the Dreamkeeper series. I put a couple things from Transmetropolitan in there. I think there's a photograph or two that look cool to me, so here we go. Here we got a Willy Wonka looking guy, but the setting is full of video cameras and equipment, film chairs, sort of like in that Willy Wonka chocolate river scene, but with everything is film related, popcorn. They got a machine gun over here by the action thing, so you can see different genres of movie, and you already get the idea from the setting. You can start putting the story together. This is some sort of a Willy Wonka-esque thing, but instead of candy, he's the master of movie genres. And he's introducing these poor people to whatever horrors he's going to unleash upon them. So, yeah, that's pretty much that one. And I think this one, it's subtle, but the eye line, the horizon line, is again right in line with this group of characters. So if you're looking at this scene and you're thinking, what's almost the viewpoint of the viewer? Like, what are we looking at the scene from? What characters do we associate with more? We associate more with these guys because they're closer to us and we're right on their eye level. So he's almost more of like the stranger in the scene, which complements what the story is doing. So let's just X these off as we go and truck right along. Here we go. Here's another commission. And just looking at this, one thing is there's a lot of clutter and junk and tools and stuff in the foreground. You got a toolbox with a hammer on it, gear, there's a lantern there. They've got this thing tilted off on its side. So if this was a more professional air garage, I guess you could say, they'd probably have this thing suspended. It would be up on blocks or with like some pulley chain systems, and they've got some pulley systems, but they look a little jury-rigged. So what this says to me is this is some kind of an unprofessional but very enthusiastic garage. These people love what they're doing. They like to tinker around. They've got a lot of experience. They've been doing this for a while, as you can see from all the stuff strewn everywhere. But they're not necessarily polished, professional, uptight, And then in the background, this whole open window or garage bay door area, this kind of serves as negative space. So in the foreground and midground, we're clustered up with dense detail. But then if you pull back and squint, you can see the value contrast coming into play. And all this stuff back here, even though there is a lot of detail, the color is also light on purpose, that it all sort of serves as one framing unit to help the things in the foreground pop a little better. So everything in the foreground is kind of like dark on a very light backdrop. And then, obviously back here you see floating blimps with little motors and a lot of interesting architecture, and a lot of the architecture seems elevated. There's a lot of cliff tops and clouds. So it already seems like you're learning a lot about what this world is and how does it work and why is it like this, and especially with terrain like that, if that sort of terrain is everywhere, having air travel makes a little more sense. So that's an example of this is all of this information. There's not a single word in the picture, so that's one of the things that settings can do for you. Are these cute little characters with some tools and some maps and instructions? Yes. But you put them in this setting, and suddenly you are a lot more able to construct some kind of a situation or story, and there's all these ingredients for your mind to play with. Let's go to The Return of Dr. Tenor next. There we go. And this one, here's another like little cinematic note. what is it called? It's a Dutch angle where the camera is actually tilted and everything in the picture is angled. And, you know, sometimes you want to do that if you want everything to have more of a chaotic, dynamic feel. And this would be one of those times where you've got a group of sort of role-play protagonist characters. They're Dreamkeepers, as you can see by their cool halos. And they're all facing off against some sort of gigantic monster. And based on the skulls and the candles and the runes on the ground, it looks like it's some sort of a summoning evil, satanic, occult situation. And based on these Klieg lights that are set up on tripods back here, it looks like it was a summoning that was done relatively recently by someone that's a little sophisticated. So maybe some kind of like a construction crew or a professor, someone who's not, you know, just some old guy in robes. So it's more of an industrial attempt to bring back some ancient evil, which looks like it was pretty successful, and now they've got to put it back in the ground where it came from. And speaking of the ground, we definitely know this is some sort of a cave or subterranean situation. So again, you have a lot of information, a lot of mood, a lot of dynamic stuff happening. Those Klieg lights in the background, they serve to pop and highlight the character nicely, and they also serve to give a rim lighting on everyone in the scene, and they make the lighting nice and sharp. So even though the floor is covered in candles, which could create a more diffused, almost a calm, relaxing sort of lighting setup, with these big, harsh, glaring spotlights casting everyone in sharp relief, that helps punch up the feeling of action. So let's look at this one, Demon Cove. We've got another Dreamkeeper. This is another commission we did once upon a time, and he's flying down using his kitchen knives and his water power to chop the hand off of this big monster guy. This guy's getting strangled. And yeah, this is just a general action scene, and you can see the water itself is obviously getting pulled into the action as part of the character tools that they're using. Not a whole lot going on in the scene aside from it's a remote sort of rocky mountain canyon area. And you can tell because there's no buildings, there's no nothing, just like canyons and water. Let's see, which one's popping up next? Oh yeah, we have this one. This is another nice commission that someone got from us. It's a Dreamkeeper character. You can see from their halo that some of the rain is actually bending around them, so their power sort of shields them from having the rain impact them completely. And yeah, you get a nice rainy scene, but even so, in the distance, one thing the rain does, which is nice, is it gives you a nice atmospheric perspective just naturally. Because the raindrops intersecting this foreground thing are fewer in number than the raindrops intersecting the middle ground. And then the raindrops between us and the far distant background, you know, they're so thick you almost can't even see the background. So that's, you know, atmospheric perspective at work, which is just helping really emphasize the depth in the scene, which also helps to make value contrast so that character pops nice and sharp in the foreground. And he's got quite the mood, and I think the rain and the blue tones are kind of accenting that mood, plus the sunset over there that is slowly having the light fade out from the whole scene. So, and the fact that he's up here, he's alone, he's not part of the town, but he's looking down on it, that sort of adds to the sense of isolation, I think, and it leads you in a direction in terms of mood. Whereas if you just had this character here, no rain, no cliffs, no city, nothing knocked out the background, I mean, he'd look kind of like a mopey dragon, but I don't think the scene would have the emotional punch that we were able to get at this level. Alright, for some reason Photoshop keeps wanting to go straight to this one, so this one looks like they are in some kind of a cool temple. I like how the light is slanting in consistently at this angle, which says to me it's like middle afternoon, which, I don't know, for some reason middle afternoon just seems like the time for adventure. I don't know why I think that, it just feels right to me. You can see he's got a dart or something in his hat, so they just appear to have narrowly escaped some sort of a dangerous situation. And even by the way these ruins are juxtaposed, you can see they're pretty old. They've got vines growing in. There's parts of the roof that are caved in, like it's overgrown. There's lily pads in the water here. So this is an old ancient temple. The rubble is still there. It's not being necessarily kept up. But even though it's kind of an ancient temple, apparently there's still some contemporary dangers that are inhabiting it. But they appear to have gotten past the danger for now because they're in a pretty light mood. They've got some sort of a treasure, which is probably what the whole situation was about. And yeah. Here's a photograph. I thought, you know, instead of just looking at illustrations, it'd be nice to play Sherlock on a photograph and see what we can learn about that setting from a real-life one. I don't know, it looks like very, very nice afternoon, evening lighting, so that gives us a time of day. Like, look at that water. It's like a mirror. So it's very clear. There's almost no wind. The water's probably fairly deep, especially if you look at the height of those hills. And you can see in the distance there's like a couple of small, what look like roads and trails here and there. A couple of small specks that look sort of like habitation. So it's not completely isolated. It's not raw wilderness. There's also some things here and there that look like they're structures of some type. So it looks like a very rustic, secluded kind of village setting. And as you can see, these boats are moored to these pylons, but there's not a dock going out to the boats, so I guess the guys have to wade when they go out to the boats, which says to me that it's not necessarily a rich village. It's maybe a little more, I don't know if it's down on its luck, because they do have boats and it looks, beautiful. But I would say it's not necessarily like a wealthy getaway. It doesn't look like it's any kind of like major resort or ski lodge situation. Because those could be remote, but they'd probably have much more, swanky accommodations, and they'd have a nice dock and probably signs trying to sell you stuff. And another thing that makes me think that this is a little bit more of an authentic rustic village is the outboard motors. You can see where there is a spot for an outboard motor on there, but it's gone. So that tells me that these boats can have outboard motors, but maybe the people who own them, either they had to sell those motors, or maybe they keep them stored in a shed so they don't get stolen or something like that. But I don't know, to me that's an interesting detail, those outboard motors being gone. So that's an example of, and you can do this like when you're walking around your neighborhood. If you really look, there's going to be stuff that you just never really inspected before, and if you look closer, you might be able to start telling yourself a story about what exactly is going on in this place. Let's see, here's another Dreamkeepers page. I think I pulled pages mostly from Volume 3 here. And you can see Mace is exploring this area, that he's got a little written note map all about it. And this is a subterranean area of a church, which I know from the previous page, but you can tell just based on this that it's being renovated. It's got those velvet ropes roping areas off where the floor is crumbling up. You can see the baseboards and bricks are falling. This column, it looks like it's kind of cracked and fragmented. It's been shored up by timbers. So that says to me that this is old, but it's also currently inhabited by people with money, because you don't get velvet ropes and like renovations and safety features and lighting, and it looks pretty dusted. There's no like tangles of cobwebs like just hanging off of the corners. So this looks like some sort of a religious temple or area. It looks like it's currently inhabited. This part down here is a little bit derelict, but it's also being renovated, so whoever's inhabiting it presently, they've got a decent amount of money. It's not abandoned or anything. Of course, Mesa's little map is going to lead him right into the derelict area, naturally. So we have him under here, and I think this is a situation where I almost wish I would have pumped up the value contrast a little more, because all the light is up there in that hallway, and there's no light sources down here where he's headed, and especially with these beams crossing over, I think that's a nice visual that sort of leads the eye down where he's going. And then, he hears someone coming from up above, and that makes him go down even faster, because he's not really supposed to be here. And then as he descends deeper into this place he's not supposed to be, it gets a little older, a little more debris, because this is the part that hasn't been renovated yet. That's why they roped it off. And the lighting also goes from like this almost like warm, welcoming, ubiquitous lighting to just the blue light from his data scroll, which gives everything a bit more of a mysterious cast, and everything looks kind of gritty and unkempt. So that is what we can kind of learn based on that setting. Oh, here we have, this is not a Dreamkeepers page, this is from the classic Transmetropolitan, which Bonitis recommended it to me. He's got quite the collection of good comics, so if you're in the market for anything cyberpunk, or just generally prescient, this is a good one. So what can we tell about Transmetropolitan from this scene here? Well, there's a lot of cigarettes on the ground that have been used, along with a lot of empty bottles. So the lead character, Spider Jerusalem, apparently he likes his substances. We've got a McDicken chicken thing, Dead Boys cigarettes, Plague magazine, it looks like, Sinjin, which actually that's kind of a classy name, TV Lied, kind of a play on TV Guide, I guess. So a lot of kind of sarcastic, tongue-in-cheek humor, a lot of kind of counterculture references in this scene here. Ebola Cola with some cigarettes like burnt out in it. So you can tell, a lot about the attitude of the whole story, the whole comic, just from an image like this. But you can also tell a lot about like how this guy lives. He's kind of a pig. He indulges in all these vices. He doesn't give two shits, and he's got quite a bit of an attitude problem, and it's a very grungy, gritty setting. It's like, yes, it's futuristic. You look out here, you have all these almost like Akira-esque signs and billboards and glowing neon advertisements, along with like a packed street below of technologically advanced cars. It's like multi-level. There's different, all the depth kind of tells you all this. But at the same time, it's futuristic, but it's also very, very dirty. Everything is dirty. Everything is grungy or broken or patched or repaired. So yeah, so you can get a lot about just the whole tone and the setting of the comic just from this one image. And another nice feature is, if you look at it, it really makes the character pop because of the value contrast. That smoke is the lightest thing in the whole image, and that black clothing is the blackest thing in the whole image, so that draws your eye right in there, along with the green and the red being the most chromatic points on the whole image. So it's very clear what the focus is, and it's a nice off-center focus. And notice how the deeper, distant background here, well, there's still tons of detail that you can gain information from, and in fact, you don't even have to sit and look at it. If you catch it out of the corner of your eye, your subconscious pretty much gets it all. That's one of the reasons that comics, you can read them fast, but you can get a lot out of them. But one thing that's nice about this framing element here is everything in here is a monochrome color. And that's nice because if this was all completely fully colored in with different hues, I think the whole image would clash so much that it wouldn't be as effective. But by having all of the hues, all of the chroma the same, it turns it into a nice framing element that doesn't compete for the eyeball's attention, and it works very nicely. So Transmetropolitan is good. You should read it. And oh, why is this one up? We already looked at this. X that out. And here we have another Dreamkeepers page. This one is Volume 3, an introduction shot to Theophany's District. So just looking at this, we can tell, well, we already know how Mason Whip got in here, presumably by this aqueduct, because you can see these boats coming through where people are riding on. And we've got a lot of religious iconography, statues, clocks, architecture. It's very, very well kept. There's not garbage in the streets. It seems like it's very swept and clean. And there's also a lot of protesters and signs and performers and stalls. So it seems to be a nice, thriving little market area where people are doing their thing, and there's got to be some amount of local commerce or money, because again, it's not filthy or dirty. It's very clean. So the religion business in Theophanies is doing pretty good, and it's keeping the place pretty nice. So yeah, that's what we can figure out from that page. What are some elements I was trying to use here? I'm just going to touch back on those. You can see there's a lot of atmospheric perspective going on. You can see there's this shot in particular doesn't have a strong foreground. There's a little bit of a foreground element here, but it's mostly a framing element alongside this. So this is really more of a panoramic pulled out shot. So there's a lot of depth, but it's still mostly distant depth. And then you get a little more contrast here between the foreground and the background, and yeah. So we're going to keep on going through and talking. I feel like this particular opening page can tell you a lot about the setting, because it's obviously a rundown urban setting. It appears to be an abandoned construction site based on all the construction stuff. The fact that there's no workers around, no tools around, nothing like that, because that would be valuable. If there's any valuable tools, they probably would have been gone a long time ago. Instead, you have like dumpsters and fencing that's been patched over and boarded up, and this building here seems to be partially constructed with like insulation siding that's just branded on the side of it. And graffiti on everything. Graffiti, which sort of is the calling card for this particular street gang, the Neon Knives. So already you get a lot of detail about just what they're all about here, based on the debris, based on the graffiti, and based on how they have this thing set up. They've got a Ryoneko fighting pit in the center of this foundation area that was dug out. It's a foundation for a building that obviously has not been built, but it's good if you're having a fight with a couple of Ryonekos. It's illegal, but this way they can't just necessarily run away and escape into the street as easy. So, and already those details doesn't require any word balloons, but you can see what's going on, and that tells you a whole lot about what kind of characters these are and what sort of direction the story's taking. Here, oh, this one has been a fan favorite. I'm not sure exactly why, but the introduction to the underground strip club. We've got the DJ up here with the music blasting. We have the dance floor, and the bricks actually cut away so you can see there's a glass surface on the dance floor, and below it is like treasure and coins and stuff. You got waterfalls and strippers, and there's lasers and spotlights and all kinds of cool effects. So the overall impression is pretty potent. You have lots of like just glowing violet lighting. It's still very dark though, so yeah. And you got lots of bottles back here, a very well stocked bar with happy sort of Buddha looking statues and iconography. Very stylized. So yeah, this, again, you know a lot about the setting just based on what you're looking at. We already looked at this one enough, I think. Spooky Scary Time. Here's this one that we already looked at, and just a couple small details. You notice when the characters walk, there's like this rainbow halo around them, and the idea is that this is such a massive structure that when you're walking on this black surface, it's magical, and it'll actually make you go faster than human speed. So that way you can get to where you're going without necessarily walking for a week. And you got all sorts of quirky stuff, like a series of doors that just open into nothing. You've got a series of doors and a walkway here that tilts up around at a weird angle. Bizarre clocks, crazy platforms, doors and windows opening in the middle of giant portraits. So the overall impression I would get from this is that some parts of it are nonsensical and must be kind of magic. You know, if there's someone that's actually building a situation like this, either they're insane or you can actually walk up that no problem, which means there's some sort of weird magic at work. So we know that this is a fantastical, like, lyrical, kind of maybe like a Harry Potter Hogwarts castle type of setting. And this one, I think it's pretty clear. A dragon blew everything up. It was all nice, lush jungle until this guy landed and decided to just blow it all up. And now we got a crater that's smoking and full of slag and magma and rocks. And I mean, he's a cool dragon. If you just had this dragon on a blank background, he'd still be cool. And we also have this guy here. I'm not sure if he was the rider or if he's someone who was just out there enjoying a stroll when the dragon decided to... But yeah, there's a little bit of a story here, and you kind of wonder, why did the dragon blow this area up? Is he going to blow anything else up, or is he just getting rolling? What's going on? We have this desert picture, which we talked about the atmospheric perspective a little, but I'm just going to add the additional note that just based on what I'm looking at in this commission, these definitely look like they're abandoned ruins. If they were active ruins, there would be some sort of a trail. Even if it was just people walking, they would eventually walk out a trail in the sand that would be a little more consistent. So there's no trails, there's no greenery, there's no baskets, there's no livestock, there's no like plotted out little squares of land where people are staking claims. So it looks like these are just completely abandoned ruins. You don't see another soul in sight except for this female character and her kids. So, and it also seems like they're looking out, to me it seems like they're looking out at the beginning of a long desert journey, because at their back is sort of this like wall of cliffs or crags that might signify they're exiting one type of terrain and entering another type. I think this is actually the same character, but she's posing in a cool temple here. And temple's got torches lit, there's candles floating in the water, which is a nice effect, I suppose. And up here, it's open and you can see the moon and the stars coming down. So I don't know exactly what this setting is all about, but it's kind of intriguing and interesting, and it looks a little bit Egyptian. And yeah, I would be interested in knowing more about that setting, because again, it doesn't look ancient. This one actually looks well kept. Things are shiny and clean. Like for one thing, there's torches in the brackets. I don't think she, went on a huge journey and decided to stop and put down a ton of floating candles in this reflecting pool. So this appears to be a temple that is currently inhabited, and by who, we're not quite sure. Here we come back to the Spider Jerusalem Transmetropolitan scene. And even though I was like, well, it doesn't have very much in the way of lighting, not every comic needs to have the same style, and this tells you lots of information. It's deliberately cluttered, because I think this is a scene where Spider Jerusalem is entering some sort of a religious convention. And of course, every religion under the sun is selling their wares, so the intent of this panel is to just blast you with information, blast you with detail, like you're walking into some sort of an overwhelming scene. Because, that's exactly what's happening, and that's the impression that he's trying to convey, and I think it is conveyed very well. I like how there's a puree of holy thoughts going into this guy's head. This guy's wearing a gigantic I'm sorry shirt. We have someone... That's actually a little bit of a poignant detail. That guy pushing a kid in a wheelchair. It shows that not everyone is like... there's a few people that are drawn to be deliberately stupid looking, but this guy with the kid in the wheelchair, not everyone is here just out of stupidity. Some people might be here out of desperation. And little details like that can, like when you notice them, they can really add a lot to the soul of the story that you're telling. Because, again, you could blow through a story, read it as fast as you can read it, and kind of get the gist of it. But when there's things like this to catch and find and digest later on, I feel like that's when a story can really come more alive, and it can just kind of keep on showing you things even after the first reading. And to me, I think that's a lot of what a comic author should aspire for. I mean, not all comics are created equal. Some, a Dilbert or a Peanuts would not be necessarily better if it had tons of background detail like this, but tons of background detail like this, I think it adds a lot of fun. It's a lot of work, but it adds a lot of fun. Alright, and I think we're down to our last example here, if I'm not mistaken. Alright, our last example is another commission that I did back in the day, and this is a good example of if you just had this character and she was just on a blank background, it'd be a pretty cool looking character, like a black dark cat, maybe a thief type character. But we put the setting around her, and the setting is going to tell us a little story. First of all, she's up here crouching, and even though, yeah, in realism, anyone could kind of look up and see her, we're going to go with the idea that they're all in this bright spotlight, so maybe their eyes are not accustomed to the dark, and plus this is a dark cat character, she's in her stealing clothes, so they're going to have a hard time seeing her. And obviously, there used to be something right on this pedestal that is gone. This manager man, or whatever he is outraged. The security guards are trying to figure it out. He's got a flashlight which reflects off the marble floor. They're looking at each other. This guy's trying to explain. There's a woman here that's wailing about whatever's gone. So the people, you kind of get a sense of their personality. Like based on the gold carpeting, this is a very, very rich museum or whatever it is, or a rich display. There's columns and jade statues everywhere, jade and gold. And yeah. Something's been stolen. Looks like she stole it. It's probably that tiara that she's wearing right there. She's got a key around her neck, which is probably how she got in here. She must have stolen a key at some point. So, yeah. And you get told a nice little story about this cool, sassy cat burglar that made a good lift, and all these crazy characters don't know what to do about it. So I hope this inspires you when you're making your own projects. This has been Living Landscapes. Let me go ahead and see. Oh yeah, if you have any questions, go ahead and pop them in the Twitch chat, and I will read through really quick at the end here and try to address any outstanding questions. So how do I get this thing to be more of a... There we go. Alright. I'm now going to look at the Twitch chat and see if you guys had any questions. We got landscapes are better than characters. I don't know if that's true, but since that's kind of the theme of the stream, I better agree. Ah, it jumped down on me. Alright. Hey ho, hello everyone. That's the day after the Hellfest. I like fungi. Someone likes fungi, so they would probably get a kick out of that environment. I wonder if he can read the chat. I can now. I am just very slow. I'm still amazed by the sense of architecture. Thank you. That's, I think I picked that up first at a Renaissance fair early in Dreamkeepers. I started just sketching some of the buildings of the Renaissance fair because I thought they were really cool, and I wanted to capture that. And since then, I keep on trying to level up. I want to try to get the districts looking nice and distinctive because, I don't know, like, when you're around cool buildings and cool architecture, it feels like just an exciting experience. It's a feast for the soul, whereas when you're just around a bunch of office buildings or like a strip mall, it like kills you inside a little bit. It's like, yeah, I can go here and get some Little Caesars or whatever, but I don't know. It's just a little bit like taking the art out of the world and turning it all so banal and dull. So yeah, architecture, that's one of the things that I want to put into my dream world is beautiful architecture, so that it's a place it's fun to be in and it's fun to think about and kind of spend some mental time there. Why would anyone put seats in a riverbed? I would say if they're crazy and insane, because the guy that was in charge of that scene looked crazy and insane in a good way. The deserty backgrounds reminds me of the Xtolo landscape. Oh, thank you. Although the Xtolo landscape, we did make their sand blood red and or white based on the time of day. Just because that seemed like it needed a little bit more of an exotic tweak, so it could be really fantasy Dreamkeepers-esque. Void Slice, I think, hey Scott, says, I see Dave has gone to Twitch too. Yep, we went to Twitch after Stream.me died, so we'll see how long we last on here. Morihane says, let's see Bobby in Briefs. That has a nice landscape. I cannot disagree. Bobby in Briefs is a pretty good landscape. Liz, why are you laughing? It's a great landscape. Devil Hunter 23 says, I need to fix my name. I don't know. If the other 22 Devil Hunters and you can get together, you could probably get some stuff done. That's a lot of Devil Hunters. Charlie Ascende says, Hey Vanth, I wonder if he would make channel emotes. That sounds like a cool thing. I don't know how to do it, and I'm too busy doing a bunch of other stuff that I need to get caught up on. So I like the idea, but I don't know when I'd be able to get to channel emotes. Wonder why it's a fan favorite. It's bloody glorious. Oh, thank you. Oh, I see an alien. Church of Ennis. Look behind the dude with the holy tea. Never mind. K Vath, boom. Hey Vathiel, what's your favorite type of landscape? I think my favorite type of landscape to be around would have to be like a forest. I don't know. I like walking in forests, and I especially like rivers or streams where the water's kind of flowing nice and fast. Because if you get standing water, then sometimes you can get like mosquitoes that breed in it, and there's going to be bugs around. So it's very pretty, but it can be kind of buggy. But if you have a nice, quick flowing stream, it just seems like, I don't know. Plus, it has a nice sound. So yeah. So I think my favorite type of landscape to be in real life is a forest nearby, like a nice river or a stream. He was behind the Holy Thoughts, dude. Any good tips when it comes to perspective in your backgrounds? I would say yes. You want to start playing with vanishing points. And I think I've got a couple videos on my YouTube in the tutorial playlist. Because I'm starting to do some more tutorial stuff, and I talk about vanishing points. But yeah, vanishing points, they can change based on how close the vanishing points are together. That changes whether or not it looks like your camera is wide angle or zoomed in. So pay attention to that. And also, yeah, vanishing point, there's just a lot to learn on perspective. So I'm not sure if I can really get anything good right off the tip of my tongue here. Kvath says, you got a schedule posted somewhere? Yes, if you go to vividpub.com/couchcon, stroll all the way down to the bottom, and there's a widget with my Twitch there, and below the widget it's like, here's the schedule, in some little text. So just click on that, and that'll take you to the schedule for streams this weekend. Come visit Europe, Dave. We have buildings older than just 300 years. That's tempting. I would love to visit Europe. That's kind of on my bucket list, to go to Europe and see some of the cool buildings. All right. Glad I got home in time for this. It helps add to the answer you gave me the other day. Cool, cool. The Giglish Mastermind, Liz. Liz.
Hi.
You are not the mastermind, to be clear. You're the assistant to the mastermind. Liz is the assistant to the mastermind. Please don't call her the mastermind. I like stuff what blow up. Thank you. You seem to have a waterfall fetish from all this water in the Volume 3 Club. I don't think I literally have a waterfall fetish, but I do think they're really cool, and they are pretty, and I have a waterfall fetish. Morahinze says, you think Starfall Mountains is a good example of a nice landscape? Yeah, sometimes. I think the Starfall Mountains are pretty. It's blue, it glows. I am a sucker for stuff that glows. Alright, what's your favorite art junk food to indulge in? I think my favorite art junk food would probably be, probably just like pinup shots, like sexy, cute characters. They're fun. Like, I don't want to seem like I'm just like dumping on them too much with all this like, oh, the setting is so important. If you don't... It's like, setting can add a lot to the story of what you're doing, but that doesn't mean you have to cram a detailed background on every single image. Sometimes, if a picture is just supposed to be like a nice little bit of cheesecake, a nice little bit of fun, a giant detailed background might detract from the point of the image. So, yeah, sometimes a little junk food is fun. Don't knock junk food too much. Become more powerful. I will try. Alright, so I think that has been our panel on living landscapes, our first panel at Couchcon. If you guys come back, check the schedule, but I think it's 9 p.m. tonight. We're going to have Minako on, and he's talking about coding, because he's got some cool projects in the works. He's actually the guy who single-handedly put together the free Dreamkeepers app. So if you don't have that yet, you can read Prelude on your phone. It's a really slick reader. He's got all sorts of different skins and options and secrets in there, so just go to the Android store, look up Dreamkeepers reading app, and you can read Dreamkeepers for free on your phone, and it's really cool. We're going to have him tonight for a panel, and he's going to be talking about the app, and maybe if he's working on some other fun things that you might be interested in. So thank you, everybody. Please go to vividpub.com/couchcon and give the other dealers who are participating some love. If you're at Anthrocon, feel free to tell other people that they can also visit Couchcon from Anthrocon if they like. And be sure to swing in and say hi to Bonitis at table N17, because he has the Vivid Vault, which currently has free prizes for anyone that figures out how to open it. And if you don't know about that, if you go up to the table and ask him about it, he can tell you all about the Vivid Vault contest. So, you guys have a good one, and I will be back later on this evening.